December 7th, 1941. A date which will live in infamy. The surprise attack on Pearl Harbor by the Empire of Japan. It's propelled the United States into the Second World War. For over 80 years, a persistent shadow has loomed over this historical event. A dark question that refuses to fade away. Did President Franklin D. Roosevelt know about the attack beforehand? Did he willingly allow it to happen, sacrificing American lives to unify a nation deeply divided about entering the war? This is one of history's most enduring conspiracy theories. Today, we delve into the heart of this claim. We'll examine the documents, analyze the intelligence, and separate the hard facts from the compelling fiction. The core of the conspiracy rests on a simple, yet powerful idea. The idea is that FDR and his top officials had enough intelligence to anticipate the Japanese strike on Hawaii, but deliberately withheld it. Proponents of this theory argue that Roosevelt was desperate to join the war against the Axis powers, but faced a strongly isolationist public in Congress. The attack on Pearl Harbor, they claim, was the perfect pretext. It was a shocking, unifying event that would galvanize American public opinion and give him the political capital he needed to declare war. But is this what truly happened? To understand the situation, we must first look at the state of intelligence in 1941. U.S. cryptographers had achieved a monumental breakthrough codenamed Magic. They had successfully cracked Japan's most secure diplomatic cipher, known as the Purple Code. This gave Washington unprecedented access to communications between Tokyo and its embassies around the world. This is often cited as the smoking gun. If they could read Japan's diplomatic messages, surely they knew about a massive military operation like the attack on Pearl Harbor. However, there's a crucial distinction to be made here. The Purple Code was for diplomatic traffic, not military communications. While these messages revealed Japan's deteriorating relationship with the U.S. and its aggressive intentions in Southeast Asia, they did not contain specific military plans, target locations, or timetables for an attack. The Japanese Navy used a completely different and far more complex set of codes, primarily the JN-25 code, which American codebreakers had only partially deciphered at the time. Think of it like reading someone's emails but not having access to their private encrypted text messages. You get a sense of their intentions, but the specific actionable details remain hidden. Intelligence analysts in Washington were certainly aware that Japan was planning a major military move. The Magic intercepts made that abundantly clear. The prevailing belief among American military and political leaders, however, was that the target would be in Southeast Asia. This was based on overwhelming evidence from the diplomatic cables. Japan's primary goal was to secure vital resources like oil and rubber, which were abundant in places like the Dutch East Indies and British Malaya. An attack on the U.S. seemed illogical and counterproductive to that goal. Another key piece of evidence used by conspiracy theorists is the so-called WINS message. This was a rumored coded phrase to be broadcast on Japanese shortwave radio to signal a break in diplomatic relations. The theory goes that this message was intercepted, confirming that war was imminent, but the warning was ignored. However, decades of research by historians and even the National Security Agency have found no definitive proof that this specific WINS message, as described, was ever received or translated before the attack. The number of credible intelligence historians who have investigated this claim and come up empty-handed is significant. The evidence for a WINS warning is flimsy at best. Let's talk about the specific warnings that did exist. On November 27, 1941, a war warning was sent from Washington to all Pacific commanders, including Admiral Husband D. Kimmel at Pearl Harbor. The message explicitly stated that negotiations with Japan had ceased, and that Japanese hostile action was possible at any moment. It was a clear, unambiguous warning of impending war. The problem was a failure of imagination, not a lack of information. The message also advised commanders that the likely targets were the Philippines, Thailand, or the Kra Peninsula. Hawaii was not mentioned as a primary target. Leadership in Washington, and even at Pearl Harbor, considered a direct, large-scale carrier attack across thousands of miles of open ocean to be a near-impossible feat of logistics and navigation. They severely underestimated the capability and audacity of the Japanese Navy. A 2001 study by the Center for Cryptologic History confirmed this, stating that while intelligence pointed to war, it did not point to Pearl Harbor. Sabotage from local agents was considered the main threat in Hawaii, not a full-scale aerial assault. This is why the planes at Pearl Harbor were parked wingtip to wingtip on the airfields. This made them easier to guard against saboteurs on the ground, but it also made them perfect, concentrated targets for bombers from the sky. It was a fatal miscalculation based on a wrong assumption. Another point often raised is the absence of America's aircraft carriers from Pearl Harbor on December 7th. Some see this as proof that FDR moved his most valuable assets to safety because he knew the attack was coming. The reality is far more mundane. The carrier USS Enterprise was returning from delivering fighter planes to Wake Island, and the USS Lexington was on a similar mission to Midway Island. The USS Saratoga was in San Diego undergoing repairs and refitting. Their absence was a matter of operational scheduling and a fortunate coincidence, not a conspiratorial design. If FDR truly wanted a devastating attack to rally the nation, allowing the carriers to be destroyed alongside the battleships would have been a far more powerful and catastrophic blow. The loss of the Pacific Fleet's carrier force would have crippled America's ability to wage war in the Pacific for years. Protecting them while sacrificing the rest of the fleet makes little strategic sense if the goal was a pretext for war. Consider the human element. For this conspiracy to be true, it would have required a massive number of people from President Roosevelt down to intelligence analysts and military commanders to be in on the plot. It would have meant that dozens, if not hundreds, of individuals willingly conspired to allow the deaths of over 2,400 of their fellow Americans. This level of secrecy and cold-blooded complicity is almost unthinkable. Historian Gordon Prange, who spent 37 years researching the attack and wrote the definitive account At Dawn We Slept, concluded there was no evidence of such a conspiracy. He called it an unmitigated myth. His exhaustive research, based on interviews with hundreds of American and Japanese participants and access to declassified documents, found that the disaster was a result of unpreparedness, miscalculation, and a series of tragic errors. There was no single piece of intelligence that said, Japan will attack Pearl Harbor on December 7th. Instead, there was a mountain of confusing and often contradictory data. The system was overloaded with information, and analysts failed to connect the dots in a way that pointed directly to Hawaii. This is a common problem in intelligence, even today. It's a phenomenon known as signal-to-noise ratio. The signal of the impending attack was buried in the noise of countless other diplomatic and military reports pointing elsewhere. In the end, the Pearl Harbor conspiracy theory is a compelling story. It offers a simple explanation for a complex and traumatic event. It paints a picture of powerful men manipulating world events, which can be more comforting than accepting that a disaster occurred due to human error. Underestimation of the enemy and sheer bad luck? But the overwhelming weight of historical evidence, declassified documents, and scholarly research points to a different conclusion. It was a failure of intelligence analysis, not a conspiracy of betrayal. The warnings were too general, the belief in Hawaii's safety too strong, and the underestimation of Japanese capabilities too profound. The tragedy of Pearl Harbor was not a plot, it was a colossal systemic failure. The truth is often less dramatic than the conspiracy, but it is a vital lesson in the importance of preparedness, clear communication, and the humility to never underestimate an opponent. Thanks for watching. If you want to uncover the truth behind more historical events, be sure to subscribe to Documentary Reel.